Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. I was with my friends, walking toward an abandoned house that most people around here would steer clear of. It sat alone on the outskirts of town, its dark silhouette swallowed by a thick, unnerving fog that wrapped around it like a shroud. The air felt heavy, dense, almost like the house itself was breathing. We had heard the rumors, of course, the whispers about it being cursed, haunted, even alive. But I wasn't afraid, not at first. Jake, always the bold one, was leading the way, his boots crunching against the gravel path that stretched toward the rusted iron gate. It groaned as we pushed it open, its sound scraping against the still night like an old man complaining about his aches. "Come on, are we really going to back out now?" Jake's voice rang out, full of that cocky enthusiasm of his. His grin was wide, daring anyone to call him scared, but we all knew deep down we had all been feeling it. That pull in the air, the strange weight that seemed to settle on your shoulders the closer we got to the house. Luis, ever the skeptic, had his phone out, fiddling with it for some kind of reassurance, though I knew it was useless here. No signal. "I swear, this place is cursed. It's like something straight out of a horror movie." He muttered it under his breath, but I caught the nervous edge in his voice. Luis didn't believe in ghosts or curses, but the atmosphere of this place was starting to get to him. "I thought you didn't believe in all that," I said, trying to lighten the mood, but even my voice felt wrong, too loud against the silence of the night. Amy, walking close behind, couldn't keep the shiver from creeping up her spine. "Yeah, well, there's something off about this place," she whispered, her gaze fixed ahead on the house, eyes narrowing as though she could see something hidden just beneath the layers of decay. "I have a bad feeling about it." "Bad feeling? It's just a house," Jake chuckled, clearly not fazed. "Maybe there's a few rats, some dust. It's no big deal. Let's check it out. We've come all this way." Tara, the quiet one, stayed further behind, her footsteps barely audible as she trailed us. I glanced at her, catching her eyes for a split second, but she looked away quickly. I could see it, feel it. She was just as uneasy as the rest of us. The house was calling to her, too. The further we walked, the more the fog seemed to wrap around us, closing us off from the outside world. The house wasn't just standing there. It was looming over us, as if it had been waiting, watching. The air was thick, too thick to breathe comfortably, like the house was absorbing our very presence, pulling us in. We reached the porch where the floorboards creaked underfoot, sounding louder than they should have in the quiet of the night. The door, hanging off its hinges, swung open with the slightest push, as if inviting us inside. The darkness inside swallowed us whole the second we stepped through. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and rot. The silence was so thick you could feel it pressing against your ears. There was no sound, no distant hum of traffic, just the eerie quiet of a place that had been abandoned for far too long. I could see the shadows, stretching unnaturally across the walls. They moved as if they were alive. Something in my gut tightened, but I ignored it, pushing forward as Jake led the way. I wanted to believe it was just a house, just an old, empty structure, but the weight in my chest kept growing. "What do you think?" Jake called out, his voice carrying into the gloom of the hallway. The walls seemed to close in on us with every step. "I don't know," I said quietly. "This place feels wrong." Luis chuckled nervously. That's just your imagination. It's old, sure, but that's it. Just some creaky boards and dusty furniture. But even as he spoke, there was something else. Something deeper in the house that I couldn't explain. I could feel it. It was watching us. The very air around us felt hungry. Amy stood close by, her flashlight flickering as she scanned the walls. I could see the tension in her shoulders. She was trying to hide it, but I knew her too well. I don't like this place. I don't like it at all, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. And then it happened. I don't know how to explain it. The floor beneath us shuddered, like the house was waking up. The walls groaned, an unnerving low hum reverberating through the floorboards and up into our chests. The house shifted. I felt it, felt the entire structure move around us, as if it were alive, bending and warping in real time. "What the hell?" Luis shouted, his eyes wide with panic. "Did you feel that?" But before any of us could react, the hallway seemed to stretch, bending at unnatural angles, turning into a dead end where none had been before. The walls shifted, moved, like the house was alive, rearranging itself to trap us inside. And that's when it happened. Amy screamed. We turned, and there she was, standing in front of a wall that hadn't been there a moment ago. Her face was pressed up against it, her eyes wide in shock and terror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her body trembled as she tried to pull away, but she couldn't. The wallpaper, thick and dark, seemed to consume her, pulling her in until her body disappeared entirely. The walls swallowed her. And then there was nothing. No trace of Amy left, just a smooth, featureless wall, as though she had never been there at all. "No!" I screamed, reaching for her, but the wallpaper didn't give. It was solid now, unyielding. Luis was frozen, his hands trembling at his sides. Tara was nowhere to be seen, and my heart was pounding, the fear clawing at my throat. I could feel it now, the house, the thing that had been hiding in the shadows all along. It was alive, and it was hungry. We had walked right into its trap. We thought we were just looking for a thrill. That's what we told ourselves as we walked toward the house, laughing and joking like a bunch of kids sneaking into a forbidden place. But deep down, I think we all felt it. The pull, the sense that something was wrong. Even though we told ourselves it was all just an old, abandoned house, that gut feeling kept gnawing at me, twisting in my chest. Jake was already in front, charging ahead like he always did, the one who never backed down. The bravado in his voice was as strong as ever. "Come on, guys, what are we waiting for?" His words echoed in the stillness, louder than they should have been. It almost felt like the house itself was listening. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the growing unease. I wasn't afraid. Not yet. Luis, ever the skeptic, was pulling at his phone, trying to get a signal, but I knew it was pointless. No one got service out here, and he was wasting his time. Still, I couldn't blame him. I think we all wanted something, anything, to feel normal again. To remind ourselves we were just exploring an old house, and not whatever this was turning into. Amy, walking close to me, glanced at me with wide eyes, her mouth a thin line. "I don't know about this," she whispered, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "Something's wrong, I can feel it." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. Amy had always been more sensitive than the rest of us. She could read the air, the room, even people, in ways I couldn't. But even she wasn't saying what we were all thinking. That feeling in the pit of our stomachs, like the air was thickening, like the house was waiting for us. Tara, who had been quiet the entire time, didn't even look at us as we walked. She was just there. A shadow in the back of the group, moving slowly, her eyes scanning the dark corners like she was looking for something that wasn't there. I felt her discomfort without needing to see it. She wasn't saying it, but I could tell that Tara, more than any of us, was starting to sense the truth. That this place was no longer just a house. It was something else. Something we were all being pulled into. When we reached the porch, the floorboards creaked underfoot. It felt like the house was sighing beneath us, groaning under our weight. I was already feeling that sinking feeling, like I was walking into a trap. But Jake was ahead, pushing open the door with that same daring grin on his face. The door swung open with an unsettling, drawn-out screech, like it was protesting our entry. The house was silent, but there was something alive about it. The moment we stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The air was thick, almost like it was pressing against us, suffocating us. Every step we took echoed in the vast emptiness, bouncing off the walls, creating a hollow, unsettling sound. Jake broke the silence, his voice louder than it needed to be. "Come on, let's see what we can find. Bet this place has some crazy stuff inside." I didn't answer him. I couldn't. Something about the way the air pressed against my chest made it hard to breathe. The shadows stretched in strange ways on the walls, like they were watching us, waiting. I could feel eyes on me, even though I knew we were alone. Amy moved ahead of me, her flashlight sweeping across the walls, revealing peeling paint and dust-covered furniture, abandoned but untouched, like the house was frozen in time. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her unease, the way her body was tense, always glancing back, always checking to make sure the others were there. Like she was afraid to be alone, even for a moment. Luis was fiddling with his phone again, his eyes flickering from the screen to the house around him, like he was hoping for a distraction, something to ground him. I couldn't help but notice that the screen kept flickering on and off. It was like the house didn't want us to be able to connect to the outside world, to remind us we were still trapped here. But Luis didn't seem to notice. He was too focused on trying to get a signal, trying to rationalize everything. Then I heard it. It started as a faint hum, a low vibration that I could feel more than hear. It seemed to pulse in the walls, a sound too deep to be a simple creak of an old house. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the more I focused, the louder it got, and the closer it seemed to come. It was like the house itself was alive, breathing in and out, pushing the air around us, making everything feel heavier. "Do you hear that?" Amy whispered, her voice tight with fear. Luis looked up, frowning. "What? There's nothing. It's just old plumbing or something." But even as he said it, the noise grew louder. It wasn't just the walls anymore, it was in the air itself, vibrating against my skin. A low, resonating hum that felt like it was coming from inside my chest, squeezing tighter with each passing second. Tara, who had been so quiet, finally spoke, her voice barely more than a breath. "It's the house," she said. Her eyes were wide, staring into the shadows. "It's not just a house. It's something else." And that was when it happened. The wall in front of us, just ahead, moved. I don't mean it creaked or groaned. I mean it shifted. The plaster bulged outward, and then, without any warning, the surface cracked. It looked like something was pushing from behind, something large and alive. I froze. We all froze. The house had changed, and it wasn't the kind of change you could explain away. It was like the house had decided to make room for something new. "Amy," I started, but my voice was lost in the growing hum. It was almost deafening now, vibrating through my bones. And then, in a sickening instant, I saw it. Amy, standing there, her eyes wide and staring at the wall as it rippled. Her hands reached out, as if she thought she could stop it. But before anyone could move, before we could say anything, the wall opened, like a mouth stretching and pulling her in. Her scream cut through the air, but it wasn't loud, it was muffled, like she was trapped inside the wall itself. She didn't have a chance to pull away. The house took her, just like that, swallowing her whole. The wall snapped shut with a horrifying thud. I ran toward her, desperate to reach out, to grab her, but there was nothing left but smooth, unbroken plaster. No sign of her, no trace. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't speak. The house had eaten her. And now, we were next. The house wasn't just old, it wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, and it was hungry. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the wall where Amy had been just a second ago. The air felt still, suffocating, like the house itself had swallowed her whole and was now waiting for the rest of us. My mind couldn't catch up with what had just happened. One moment, she was standing in front of that wall, her eyes wide with terror, and the next, she was gone. Gone. No scream, no sound, just nothing. I could still hear her, though. Her scream echoed in my mind, trapped in my skull, muffled and distant, as though it was coming from far off, like it had already been swallowed by the house. It was unreal, like I had imagined it, but I hadn't. I saw it. I felt it. She was there, and then she wasn't. Just gone. I forced myself to look away, to look at the others, but I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my voice stuck in my chest. I turned to Luis, desperate for him to tell me this was some kind of sick joke, anything that made sense. But his face was blank, eyes wide with fear. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the same spot where Amy had been, his face pale, his mouth moving, but no words coming out. His body trembled, like he was frozen in place, stuck in the same moment that had just swallowed Amy. Amy, where did she go? The words were barely a whisper, and when they left my mouth they sounded wrong. Hollow, empty, like they didn't belong to me. Luis didn't respond. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the wall, the same smooth, unbroken wall that had just consumed her. I tried to focus, to think, but my mind was spinning. Nothing made sense. No part of this house felt right. The air around me was thick, pressing against my chest, as if the house was trying to smother us. Tara, who had been eerily silent until now, spoke up, her voice trembling with panic. What just happened? Where did she go?" Her words hung in the air, unanswered, echoing off the walls like a broken record. I didn't know. I couldn't know. How could I? The wall had taken her. There was nothing left, no trace, no mark, just a smooth blank surface where her terror had been. I moved toward it, my body moving on its own. I had to touch the wall, to prove to myself that it hadn't swallowed her whole, that she wasn't somewhere inside it. But as I took one step closer, I heard it, the noise. That low, disturbing scraping sound, like something was dragging itself across the floor beneath us. It came from the direction behind the walls, from somewhere deep inside the house, moving closer with every breath I took. The scraping grew louder, closer, and I couldn't breathe. My chest was tightening, and my head was spinning. It felt like the house itself was coming alive, moving, shifting, growing restless. "Luis!" I shouted, desperate, but my voice was barely a whisper against the hum that had begun to fill the room. It was low, almost like a vibration in the air itself. The house was alive, I realized. It was watching us, hunting us. But Luis didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. He was too busy trying to make sense of the impossible, desperately pulling at the walls, pacing back and forth like a man trapped in a cage. Tara's voice cut through the suffocating silence again. "What is that?" she gasped, her eyes wide with terror, her hand gripping my arm like she might fall apart if she let go. I turned, my heart in my throat, and followed her gaze. What I saw made my blood run cold. In the farthest corner of the room, someone, was emerging from the wall. At first, I thought it was a shadow, just a trick of the light, but no, it was a face. A face, pressed up against the surface of the wall, its features slowly stretching, expanding outward like it was being pushed from behind. The skin of the wall distorted, rippling like water, and there it was. A face, twisted, contorted, like it had been pulled from the very fabric of the house. The eyes were wide, desperate, pleading. The mouth was open, but no sound came from it. Just a silent scream stretching across the surface, as if it wanted to shout but couldn't. My stomach twisted as I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't Amy, it couldn't be, but it was someone else. Someone trapped. Trapped just like she was. And then, before I could even process what I was seeing, the face began to dissolve back into the wall. The shadows pulled it in, swallowed it whole. It was as if the wall had never been touched, as if nothing had ever happened. No face, no scream, just smooth plaster. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. The house was alive, feeding on us, trapping us. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I was paralyzed with terror, unable to move, unable to process what was happening. The walls, they were alive, and they were hungry. "We have to get out of here," Luis said, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. I don't know if he was talking to me or to himself or to the house, but his words echoed in the silence. We had to run. We had to leave. But there was no way out. The house had already sealed us in. The walls had closed behind us. The front door had vanished. I glanced back at where Amy had been, and the fear sank deeper. The house had taken her. It had taken her, and it was coming for us next. I turned to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The floor seemed to stretch beneath me, pushing me forward, into the dark, into the abyss. I don't know how much time had passed after Amy disappeared. Minutes? Hours? It didn't matter. The seconds felt like they were stretching, bending, warping. I couldn't focus on anything except the empty space where she had been. The walls around us were still humming, that low, unsettling sound vibrating through my bones. I was numb, every thought fractured by the horror of what had just happened. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the spot where Amy had vanished, swallowed whole by the wall. I couldn't stop thinking that maybe if I looked hard enough, if I stared long enough, I would see her again. Maybe she was still there, trapped inside the house somewhere. But I didn't see her. All I saw was smooth plaster, nothing more, nothing less. The house had taken her, and it was impossible to deny. I barely heard Luis's voice through the fog of my thoughts, his voice shaking as he muttered something about getting out, but it didn't matter. I couldn't move. The fear had paralyzed me. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The air was too thick, pressing against me, making it hard to breathe. I turned to Luis, hoping he had a plan, something, anything, that could explain what had happened. But all I saw was the same terror mirrored in his eyes. He was just as lost as I was. And then I saw her, Tara. She had been so quiet up until now, but she wasn't herself anymore. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place. She was standing by the corner of the room, staring into the shadows like they were pulling her in. Something in her had changed, something that made my gut twist. She wasn't Tara anymore, she was just empty. It was like the house had gotten to her first, like she was already under its control. "Tara," my voice came out weak, but I couldn't keep the tremble from it. "Tara, what's wrong?" But she didn't answer. She didn't even acknowledge me. Her gaze was fixed on something in the darkness. something that I couldn't see, but that was definitely there. Something pulling her. I stepped toward her, trying to shake her out of whatever trance she was in, but as I reached out, I felt it. The air. It had changed, thickened, like it was trying to crush us. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in, the house growing tighter, more constricting, like it was folding in on itself, folding in on us. Tara's body jerked, like something had yanked her forward, and I reached out, but my hand couldn't touch her. It was like an invisible force had taken hold of her, dragging her towards the corner, away from us. "Tara, no!" Luis shouted, his voice breaking. But she wasn't listening. She couldn't hear him. Her legs moved against her will, dragging her forward, her feet scraping across the floor, leaving marks as she was pulled toward the darkness. Her face twisted in fear, but she couldn't stop. I could see her trying to fight it, her body jerking, but the house was stronger than she was, stronger than all of us. Tara wasn't just walking, she was being dragged, like the house itself was reaching for her, pulling her into its depths. "Tara, fight it!" I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of the house. That ever-present hum, vibrating the walls, growing louder, louder, until it was all I could hear. I felt it in my chest, that thrumming sensation, like my heart was sinking with the pulse of the house. The walls were alive, the floors were alive, the air was alive, and it was feeding on us. I reached out again, my hands shaking, but I was too slow. Before I could even get to her, before I could even make sense of what was happening, the floor beneath us shifted. It didn't just creak or groan, it split. Like the house had opened its mouth and Tara was caught in it. She fell. It happened so fast, so suddenly I couldn't process it. One moment, she was right in front of me, and the next, she was gone. The ground had split wide open, a jagged, gaping hole in the floor, swallowing her whole. She didn't even have time to scream. Her body disappeared into the blackness below, the sound of her fall muffled by the roar of the house. I froze. I couldn't move. My body refused to respond. I felt sick, like the world was spinning around me and I was being pulled apart. Tara was gone, just like that. The house had taken her. Luis screamed her name, but it was useless. There was no way to reach her. The hole in the floor had closed up almost as quickly as it had opened, leaving no trace of Tara, just an empty space where she had stood. It was like she had never existed. I could feel the weight of the house, pressing down on us, closing in on us. And it was getting stronger. The walls were moving, the floor was shifting. I could hear it, the house breathing, and it wasn't done. It wasn't done with any of us. Tara was gone, Amy was gone, and we were next. I tried to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. The house had us. We were trapped, just like the others before us. There was no way out. The walls wanted us, the house wanted us, and it wasn't going to stop until it had us all. I could feel the house closing in on me. Every step I took felt heavier, like the air itself was pulling me down, wrapping itself around me, squeezing the life out of me. The walls groaned and shifted as if they were alive, and the floor beneath me felt like it was moving, shifting, every time I tried to steady myself. It was like the house was a living, breathing thing, playing with us, feeding on our fear. Luis was just a few steps behind, his frantic breathing barely louder than the hum that filled the air, vibrating in my chest. We had been walking for what felt like hours, but I couldn't tell how much time had passed anymore. The house had turned into a maze. No matter which direction we took, no matter how hard we tried, the layout kept changing. It was like we weren't even in the same place anymore. Like we were in a twisted version of reality where nothing made sense. Nothing was real. The doors that had once been clearly defined, The windows that had been there a moment ago, they were gone. Each turn we made only led to more hallways, more empty rooms, each one a distorted copy of the last. The very walls seemed to pulse, breathing in and out as if the house itself was alive, feeding off our confusion, our panic. The hum grew louder with each step, echoing through the house, vibrating in my bones until it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. And still, I moved forward, like a puppet on strings, unable to stop. "Where are we going?" Luis whispered, his voice trembling, breaking the silence. I didn't have an answer. I couldn't tell him where we were going because I didn't know. The house wasn't just old, it was alive. I could feel it. I could feel its hunger wrapping around me, pulling at me. It was waiting, watching, and then, like a cruel joke, I saw it. A door. Standing in the middle of the hallway, out of place, out of time. At first, I thought it was just another trick of the house, another illusion, like all the other doors that had led us nowhere. But there was something about this one. Something real. I pointed to it, my voice shaking as I said, "Luis, look." Luis didn't need any more encouragement. We moved toward it together, each step heavier than the last, the air growing colder, thicker as we neared the door. My heart was racing in my chest, my palms clammy as I reached for the handle. I didn't know if I wanted to open it or if I was just too desperate to stop myself. I pulled the door open, praying it would lead us out. But what we found wasn't freedom. It wasn't the escape we had been hoping for. It was another hallway, exactly the same as the one we had just left. The walls were the same, the floor was the same. The light, dim, unnatural, was the same. "What the hell?" I whispered, stepping back. Luis didn't answer. He just stared at the door, eyes wide with disbelief. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to loop back on us. We couldn't have gone in a circle. There had to be something. Anything. "This can't be real," Luis said, his voice rising in panic. "This isn't real. It's not real." But the door was real. The hallway was real. The house was very real. I reached for the door again, but before I could touch it, it moved. The door didn't stay where it was. It shifted in the wall like it was part of it, sliding across the surface and out of reach. "No," I gasped, the fear clenching around my chest like a vice. "No, no, no." I turned back toward Luis, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "We're not getting out of here. It's playing with us." Luis backed away, eyes darting around, looking for something, anything, that would make sense of this nightmare. But the walls were closing in on us. The house wasn't just shifting the hallways, it was shifting us. We were no longer in control. We were part of the house now. I turned around, frantically looking for another way, but everywhere I looked, it was the same. The walls stretched, the floor buckled. Nothing looked familiar anymore. The doors, the windows, they were all part of the maze. The house was toying with us, pulling us in deeper, making sure we never got out. I reached for the door again, the one that had moved, but it was already gone. The house had already rearranged itself. There was no way forward, no way back. "Where are we?" I whispered. "Where are we, Luis?" Luis didn't answer. He was looking at the walls, his hand pressed to his forehead, as if trying to steady himself, as if he could force some kind of order onto this madness. But it didn't work. The house didn't follow rules, it didn't follow anything, it just was. "We're trapped," he said, his voice cracking. "We're not getting out. The house won't let us." I couldn't deny it. I didn't want to accept it, but I knew it was true. The house had us. It had already taken Amy and Tara. It was taking us too, one step at a time, suffocating us with its weight. I looked at Luis, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the walls, his mouth moving as if he were trying to speak, but no words came out. I followed his gaze, my heart hammering in my chest. And then I saw it. The walls. The walls were shifting again. This time, it wasn't just the hallway, it was the very foundation. The floor beneath our feet cracked open, a deep, jagged rift forming in the middle of the room. And from it, something moved. Something that wasn't human, something that was too big, too dark to understand. It was coming for us. And I realized with sickening clarity that the house wasn't just a maze, it was a trap. I didn't think it would end like this. Not like this. I don't know how much time had passed since we started running. Minutes? Hours? The walls around us, the house, had already started shifting. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, a product of exhaustion and fear, but it wasn't. The house was moving, it was alive. I could feel it in the air, the way it pressed against me, the way the shadows seemed to stretch longer, curling like they were waiting for us to fall into them. I had to keep moving, we had to get out. There was no choice. The door we'd found, the only thing that had looked like freedom, was our last hope. Luis was right behind me, but when I turned to look at him, his face was pale, eyes wide, his body shaking from the strain of running, the dread growing inside of him. I could feel it too. It was thick, suffocating, wrapping itself around my chest with every step. The hum had grown louder now, that horrible, vibrating sound that made my skull throb. It was like the house was breathing, like it was alive and it was drawing us in, feeding off the panic that was starting to rise in both of us. We kept running, but every step felt heavier, like the ground itself was trying to hold us in place. And then, just as we reached the door, just as I thought we were finally getting out, it happened. I grabbed the handle, my hand slick with sweat, my breath short. But when I pulled the door open, it wasn't the relief I expected. No, it was another hallway. Another twisted version of the one we had just come from. The walls were the same, the light was the same, dim, flickering, sickly, like it was all a lie. No, I gasped. No, no, no. Luis froze behind me, his body tensing like he could feel it too. "This isn't real," he whispered, backing away. His voice was hollow, full of disbelief. "This can't be happening." But it was. It was happening. The hallway stretched out in front of us, identical to the one that had just led us to the door. It felt wrong. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened with panic, but there was no way out. I could feel the house wrapping itself around me, its grip tightening, making it impossible to think, to move. I could hear the walls closing in on us, but I couldn't turn around, I couldn't look back. And that's when it happened. The door behind us, the one we had just come through, moved. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, my feet glued to the floor as I watched the door shift in the walls, sliding slowly, like it was part of the house itself. It wasn't real. Luis gasped, his face drained of color. "What the hell is happening?" His voice cracked, raw with panic. Before I could answer him, the air seemed to twist. The hallway started to bend, the walls warping, the space around us stretching. It was the house. The house was shifting again. And then it hit me. We weren't just in a maze. We weren't just stuck in some haunted house. No, the house itself, it was toying with us. It wasn't just rearranging rooms. It was alive. And it wanted us. It needed us. It fed on us, on our fear, on our desperation. I turned back to the door, but it was gone. The walls had closed in, sealing us in a space with no way out. I ran toward the other hallway, hoping there was some escape, but as I ran, the ground beneath me shifted again. opening up like the jaws of a beast ready to swallow me whole. I fell. My legs gave out beneath me, and I crashed into the ground with a thud, gasping, unable to stop myself from rolling into the open pit below. I hit the ground with a sickening jolt, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt the pull. The house's grip tightening around me. The darkness closed in. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the overwhelming hum that had become a constant, ringing in my skull, driving me mad. And then the worst part happened. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I couldn't pull myself out of the pit, couldn't get up. The ground around me shifted again, the walls pressing in, curling around me like fingers tightening in a vise. And in the distance, just beyond my reach, I saw something I couldn't explain. A face. A familiar face. "Amy?" I whispered, my voice cracking, but the face didn't respond. It just watched me. It stared at me with hollow eyes, its features distorted, twisted. It was her, but it wasn't. I could see her, trapped inside the house, just like the others. I gasped, struggling to move, to scream, but I couldn't. It was too late. The house had already taken me. And as I realized the truth, a shiver ran down my spine. The door, the light, the escape, it had all been an illusion. I was never going to get out. And then I felt it, the walls closing in, and everything went dark. I don't know what happened after that. Maybe I'm still there, trapped in the maze, my voice lost in the walls. Or maybe the house let me go. But I'll never know, because the house doesn't let anyone leave. The house is hungry. I don't even know how long it's been since I started running. Time has become a blur. The only thing I know is that I can't stop, that I'm being pulled deeper into this nightmare. The house, it's alive. I've stopped looking behind me. I don't dare. The shadows are always there, moving, twisting like they have a life of their own. The walls, they don't stay still. Every corner I turn, the hallway shifts. The air gets colder. The floor groans, like the house is flexing its muscles, growing around me, getting tighter, like it's pressing me into the ground. And the hum, the constant hum. It vibrates through my skull, through my chest, in my very bones. But it's not just the sound, it's the feeling. The house is watching. It knows I'm here. It's waiting for me to make the wrong move, for me to fall into its trap. And I know I will. It's just a matter of time. I haven't seen anyone in what feels like forever. Luis, Amy, Tara, they're gone. I can hear their voices in my head, faint whispers calling me. But I know it's not them, it's the house. It's using their voices to trick me, to lure me deeper. The house knows what I'm afraid of, knows how to make me want to turn back. But I can't. I'm already in too deep. I've tried running, I've tried screaming, but nothing works. The walls keep shifting, blocking my way. There's no escape, no way out. Every time I think I've found a door, it vanishes the moment I touch the handle. Every hallway loops back on itself like the house is playing some sick game. And I'm the pawn. I can feel the hunger in the air. It's like the house is feeding on my fear, on my desperation. The longer I stay, the more it grows. I can feel it in the walls, in the ground beneath me. It's alive, and it wants me. I don't know if it's even possible to get out anymore. I don't even know if I want to. Every time I think I'm getting closer to freedom, the house just tightens its grip around me. There's nothing left but shadows and that infernal hum. I can hear them now, the faces pressed against the walls, the ones who came before me. They're all trapped here like I am. Their voices are distorted, suffocated by the house's hunger, but I hear them clearly. Amy, Tara. I don't know if they're really here, or if I'm just losing my mind. The house is warping my thoughts, feeding on my terror, and I can feel myself slipping. Then I hear it. Footsteps, slow, steady, but they're not my own. They're not Luis's either. They're the footsteps of something else, something worse. My heart pounds in my chest as I turn to look, and I see it. A shadow. A figure in the distance moving toward me. It's not human, it's something else. It's something that doesn't belong here. My feet freeze. I can't move. I don't know if it's fear or if the house is just holding me in place, trapping me in this moment. The figure gets closer, and I can see its shape more clearly now, the faint outline of something huge and dark. Too large for this space. It moves like it's part of the house, like it's a shadow that's been pulled from the walls, stretching and contorting as it moves. I try to scream, but nothing comes out. My throat is dry. My mouth feels like it's filled with sand. And then I hear it. Amy's voice. Soft, pleading. Come closer. It's waiting for you. I know it's a trap. I know it's not her. It's the house, using her voice to pull me in, to make me want to step closer. But I can't help it. The pull is too strong. I take one step forward, then another, and before I know it, I'm standing at the edge of the dark figure. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. It just watches me, and I can feel the weight of its gaze suffocating me. The house knows me. It knows everything about me. It's been feeding off my fear this whole time. It knows how to make me feel small, powerless. It knows how to make me want to fall into its trap. And then, just when I think I can't take it anymore, the walls start to move again. The shadows bend and twist. The house isn't just breathing now, it's alive. The air becomes thick, and I can feel it pressing against me, suffocating me. I can't breathe, I can't think. The house is closing in, it's swallowing me whole. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. I want to run, but I can't. My body won't obey me. The house has me now. I am part of it, a piece of its endless hunger. The last thing I see is the door, the one that led me to freedom. It's gone. I'm trapped, forever. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with me here at Frightful Whispers. Remember, the darkness holds secrets, but also whispers truths to those who dare to listen. If tonight's tale sent shivers down your spine, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep the fire of fright alive. Rest easy, but keep one eye open, for the night is never truly still. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and let the whispers guide you.